The first thing I saw were the flashing lights, red and blue, painting the inside of the ambulance. My cheek felt like it was on fire, stinging from where she'd slapped me in front of everyone. An EMT leaned over, his voice quiet. "Who hurt you?" My throat was tight, but I managed to whisper the only truth I had left. It was my family. My name is Valentina Gates. I woke up to the smell of antiseptic and vinyl. The world was flashing. A rhythmic pulse of red and blue that painted the metal ceiling above me. A high, thin whine cut through the fog in my head. A siren. But it felt distant, like it was happening to someone else. It was the sound of a crisis, but the crisis was me. Then the pain registered. It was a white-hot sheet covering the entire left side of my face, from my temple down to my jaw. It throbbed in time with the siren. It was a humiliating, sharp pain, the kind that feels both physical and emotional, a sting that says you are worthless. "Valentina, can you hear me?" A man's face swam into view. Tired eyes, maybe mid-40s, wearing a dark blue uniform, an EMT. He was calm, but his eyes held a familiar, weary sadness. He had seen this before. "Who hurt you?" I tried to answer. I opened my mouth, but my throat was sandpaper. My tongue felt thick, heavy, tasting salt from the tears I hadn't realized I'd shed and something metallic. Copper. I swallowed, and the simple act sent a spike of pain through my jaw hinge. I reached up, my fingers hovering, afraid to touch the skin. They brushed against the swollen, tender flesh. It was already heating up, the flesh puffing up under my touch, promising a spectacular bruise. He saw me flinch. "Don't touch it. We'll get some ice on that as soon as we get to Silver Ridge." "Who hurt you?" he asked again. His voice was patient, but it wasn't a suggestion. His question dislodged the memories. They didn't drift back. They punched through the fog. Sharp and brutal. Flashes. The bright, chemical blue of the swimming pool at the Willow Creek house. It was perfect. An unnatural turquoise rectangle set against the perfect, manicured green lawn. The smell of chlorine and expensive barbecue. The smoky scent of hickory chips my father always insisted on. The sound of ice clinking in heavy crystal tumblers, the superficial laughter of my cousins. Another flash, a broken wine glass on the flagstone patio, dark red liquid, Cabernet, spreading like a rumor next to a shattered crystal stem. Vanessa had slammed it down. Another, yelling, not just noise, but words. Vanessa's voice, my stepmother's voice, high and tight with a fury she usually saved for service staff. "It's just a car, Valentina. After everything we have done for you, you are breaking this family over a piece of metal." My father, Greg, standing by the massive stainless steel grill, tongs in his hand, saying nothing, just staring at the charring steaks. He didn't look at her. He didn't look at me. He just cooked. Then the final flash, the one my burning cheek wouldn't let me forget. Vanessa, her face blotchy red, her expensive blonde highlights shaking as she screamed, "You ungrateful little—" And then the sound. It was a sharp, wet crack that echoed across the backyard. It was so loud it silenced everything. It silenced the upbeat playlist. It silenced the chirping cicadas in the oak trees. It silenced the 30 relatives who were standing there, holding their plates, watching. My head snapped to the side, my hair whipping across my face. The world tilted, the perfect blue pool and the perfect green lawn blurring into a streak of color. I tasted the blood then, a sudden gush of copper from where my teeth had split the inside of my cheek. "Miss Gates?" The EMT's voice pulled me back. He was trying to take my blood pressure, his fingers gently wrapping the cuff around my bicep. His other hand, steady and professional, moved to my left wrist, the one hanging limply over the gurney's edge, to find a pulse. I gasped, a raw, choked sound, and yanked my arm back, cradling it to my chest. He froze. "Did I hurt you? Is your wrist injured?" I uncurled my fist, my fingers stiff. There, on the pale skin of my inner wrist, were 4 perfect, deep crescent moons, already turning a violent shade of purple. The skin was broken in 2 places, tiny beads of blood welling up. Another memory, piggybacking on the first, Vanessa, grabbing me after the slap, trying to drag me back to the patio table where the paperwork sat, waiting. "Stand up," she'd hissed, her voice low and venomous, her nails digging into my flesh. "Stand up and tell everyone you're sorry. Tell them you're buying the car for your brother. Stand up and show the family what a good daughter you are." The EMT looked from the claw marks on my wrist to the blooming, angry bruise on my face. His professional calm cracked. "It wasn't a stranger, right?" he asked. His voice was softer now, but firm. It wasn't really a question. It was a confirmation. He knew. The lie was right there. It was sitting on my tongue, the one I'd been trained to tell my entire life. "I fell." It was the family motto. "I'm clumsy." It was an accident. "I tripped by the pool." It was the glue that held the whole rotten, beautiful structure together. But the fire on my face and the deep throb in my wrist burned the lie away. I was done with that lie. I met his eyes. The red and blue lights flashed across his face, making him look like a confessor in a neon booth. "It was my family," I whispered. The words hung in the sterile air of the ambulance, tasting like poison and ash. It was the first time I had ever said it out loud. It was my family, and saying it made it real. "What happened?" he asked, turning to write on a small notepad. His voice carefully neutral again. "They wanted money." It sounded so cheap, so small, but it was the whole truth. "They wanted me to buy my stepbrother a car. I didn't say it was a $60,000 luxury SUV. I didn't say my stepbrother, Tyler, was 20 years old and had never held a job for more than 3 weeks. I didn't say it was supposed to come from my trust fund, the fund my grandfather, Henry, had set up for me and me alone, with ironclad stipulations, or so I'd thought. "A car," the EMT repeated, not looking up from his pad. "They called it a family investment, a way for him to get a good start. They held this party, this big 4th of July barbecue for the whole extended family, just to pressure me into signing the papers. They wanted to do it publicly, to make it a celebration, my gift to the family." The humiliation was worse than the pain. It was a new, cold sickness in my stomach. They hadn't just ambushed me. They'd staged it. They'd invited an audience. They'd set the stage to watch me either fold to their demands or be publicly shamed as selfish and cruel. They knew I hated scenes. They had bet on it. And I had ruined their bet. I had said no. The EMT finished his notes and pulled a small plastic band from his kit. He looped it around my good wrist, the one without the nail marks. It snapped shut with a quiet, final click. I stared at it. White plastic, black, blocky letters, Gates, Valentina. This cheap little band, this piece of plastic they give to car crash victims and heart attack patients, to the anonymous and the injured. It identified me, it claimed me, it said, "This person is here. This person matters enough to be cataloged." It was more confirmation of my existence than I had ever received from the people who shared my last name. If you're the eldest, you already know. You know exactly what I'm talking about. They don't start with their hands. They start with your wallet. They start when you're 12 and you're the built-in babysitter, free of charge. They start when you're 16 and your first paycheck from the coffee shop just gets absorbed into the household groceries. And you're selfish for asking where it went. They start when you're 22 and they borrow a few thousand for a credit card bill, just until they get back on their feet. You are the designated responsible one, the rock, the one who can handle it, the one who doesn't make waves. You are the eldest daughter, which in families like mine is just another word for the first line of credit. You are the emergency fund. You are the ATM. And they will keep making withdrawals, taking your time, your energy, your patience, your money, until you are overdrawn and empty. And then, when you finally say no, when you finally lock the account because you have nothing left to give, that's when they use their hands. The slap wasn't the first attack, it was just the final withdrawal, the one that bankrupted the whole account. I lay there on the gurney, the sirens screaming as we turned onto the main highway, leaving the expensive hills of Willow Creek behind. The pain in my face was settling into a deep, heavy, righteous ache, but underneath it, something else was forming, something cold and hard and sharp. It was rage. But it wasn't the hot, messy, out-of-control rage of Vanessa. It was a cold, quiet, calculated rage, the kind that builds slowly, over decades, and finally solidifies into something unbreakable. They thought the slap would be the end of it. They thought it would shut me up, put me back in my place, teach me the lesson. They thought I would cry, sign the paper, and the party would go on. I looked at the plastic bracelet on my wrist. Gates. Valentina. They were wrong. This wasn't an ending. This was a beginning. In my head, clear as a bell, I made the vow. I would not be silent. Not again. Not ever. The heavy doors of the ambulance swung shut with a solid, definitive thump and a hiss of pneumatic seals, locking out the sounds of the party, the smell of the barbecue, and the house I would never call home again. The vehicle lurched forward, pulling me away from them. They were probably back at the table already. Vanessa was probably in the powder room, fixing her makeup, blaming me for making her hysterical. My father was probably pouring another drink. The cousins already starting to whisper. The narrative already changing. Valentina always was difficult. They thought they had won. They thought they had silenced me. But they don't know. They forgot about Grandpa. He was sitting at the head of the table, just as he always did. He hadn't said a word, but while they were all watching me, I was watching him. Grandpa saw everything. I grew up in Willow Creek. If you've ever driven through those kinds of neighborhoods, you know the look. It's a land of 3-car garages, sprawling lawns that look like green carpet, and towering, mature oak trees that probably predate the country. Every house is a 2-story brick or stone statement, a poster child for American happiness. The driveways are clean. The mailboxes are quaint. The silence is expensive. It's the kind of place where problems are not supposed to exist. If they do, they are certainly not discussed. They are landscaped over, repainted in a neutral beige, or sent to a very expensive boarding school. My real mother fit into that world. For a while, she was quiet, loved gardening, and hosted book clubs. Then she got sick, cancer. It was fast, brutal, and very inconvenient for the Willow Creek aesthetic. When she died, I was 8. The house went quiet for about 6 months. The immaculate lawn got a few weeds. It was the only time I ever saw my father look lost. Then he met Vanessa. He met her at a conference in Dallas. He came back a different man, lighter, happier, like he'd been holding his breath and could finally exhale. 2 months later, she moved in. 6 months after that, they were married. Vanessa was everything my mother was not. She was loud. She was dazzling. Her laugh was a performance that filled the whole house, demanding you listen. She was beautiful in a sharp, expensive way, all perfect teeth, sun-kissed skin, and a kind of restless, crackling energy. She was a master of social graces. The extended family, my aunts and uncles and cousins, were instantly obsessed with her. She remembered their birthdays. She sent lavish gift baskets. She hosted barbecues where the wine was always top shelf, and the conversation never stopped. She brought her own son, Tyler. He was 6, 2 years younger than me, and from the moment he walked in the door, he was anointed. He was the golden future. He was the boy of the house. He was all-American. Vanessa enrolled him in every conceivable activity: Little League, soccer, junior golf, coding camp. My father, who had never once tossed a baseball with me, was suddenly at the park every Saturday, his face glowing with pride as Tyler swung a tiny bat. I, on the other hand, was the quiet one, the responsible one, such a good helper. My new role was assigned to me so quietly, I didn't even realize it was happening. It started with Vanessa asking me to just watch Tyler for a second while she took a call. That second turned into an hour. That hour turned into every afternoon. "It's just what eldest daughters do, honey," she'd say, ruffling my hair with her perfectly manicured fingers. "You're my big helper. I couldn't do it without you." It was the doing that became my entire identity. By the time I was 12, I was no longer a child in that house. I was junior staff. While Tyler was at practice, I was doing homework, not just my own, but helping him with his, which meant sitting with him, re-explaining what the teacher had said, and eventually, just correcting his answers so Vanessa wouldn't have a meltdown about his grades. While Tyler was playing video games, I was learning to contribute. This meant setting the table for dinner. Then it meant clearing the table. Then it meant helping load the dishwasher. Then it meant just doing all of it, because it was faster if I did it myself. Family gatherings, like the 4th of July barbecue or Thanksgiving, were the worst. They were my stage. But I was the stagehand, not the star. My cousins, kids my own age, would arrive in their new clothes, toss their bags on the floor, and run out to the pool. I would be the one to pick up their wet towels. I would be the one refilling the chip bowls, shuttling plates of food from the kitchen to the patio, and taking drink orders. "Can you grab me another lemonade, Val?" my uncle would call out, not even looking up from his conversation. "Be a doll." My cousins got used to it. They saw me as an extension of the household, like the smart fridge or the pool cleaner. I was just the part of the house that moved and fetched things. Vanessa was a master. She never raised her voice at me. Not back then. She didn't have to. She operated with a kind of soft, insidious manipulation that made you feel guilty for even thinking of yourself. It was a verbal sleight of hand. "Oh, honey, I know you have your book report due, but Tyler's game is so important for his confidence. You understand, right? You're so mature for your age." "I'm just so stressed with this charity gala. Valentina, my head is splitting. Could you just handle dinner tonight? You're a lifesaver." She guided me, with 1,000 tiny nudges, into the belief that my one and only purpose was to sacrifice. My needs were trivial, my wants were selfish, but the family's needs, which always meant her needs and Tyler's needs, were paramount. My compliance was natural. My service was just being helpful. My own achievements were quietly suffocated. When I won the 9th grade essay competition, I came home clutching the little blue ribbon. I found Vanessa and my father in the kitchen, celebrating. Tyler had been named Most Improved Player on his soccer team. They were popping a bottle of sparkling cider for him. "Oh, that's nice, honey," Vanessa said when I showed her the ribbon, giving it a quick tap. "That's sweet. Now, could you grab the good glasses for Tyler? We're making a toast." The ribbon ended up in a drawer. I never mentioned it again. I had a secret dream. I wanted to write. I kept a journal hidden under my mattress, and I filled it with stories, observations, the things I couldn't say out loud. I loved the feeling of pinning the world down with words. I wanted to study journalism, maybe accounting, something with structure, something with rules that made sense, unlike the silent, shifting rules of my own home. But there was no oxygen in the house for my dreams. College, when it was discussed, was always about Tyler. "We need to save for Tyler's tuition. This prep school will look great on Tyler's applications." When I brought up my own plans, my father would just wave a hand. "Oh, there's plenty of time for that. Let's just get Tyler settled." The message was clear. He was the investment. I was the support staff. When I turned 16, I got a job at a local bookstore. It was my sanctuary. The smell of paper and coffee, the quiet rustle of pages. It was the only place where no one asked me to fetch them anything. I started saving every dollar I made. I opened my own bank account, a small, secret act of rebellion. I saved for a laptop. I saved for a car. I saved for an application fee. It took them about 3 months to find out. "It's wonderful that you have that little job," Vanessa said one night, sorting the mail. "It's so important to learn responsibility." Then, a week later, "The property taxes are just insane this year. Greg," she'd sigh at dinner, loud enough for me to hear. "I just don't know how we're going to swing that in Tyler's new golf clubs." My father would look at me. "Valentina, you've got that savings. You're not using it for anything. Why don't you pitch in? We're a family. We help each other. My savings account, the one I had built by stocking shelves and working weekends, became the communal resource. It was the family's overflow fund. First, it was $200 for the golf clubs. Then it was $500 for a surprise vet bill for the dog. Then it was $1,000 for the deposit on the beach house rental. It was never a question. It was an expectation. My money was our money. Tyler's money was his money. The extended family only reinforced it. At every holiday, my aunts would pinch my cheek. "Valentina is just so helpful," they'd coo. "So responsible. You're so lucky. Vanessa, my girls would never lift a finger." They all said I was helpful. They all said I was good. Not one of them, not once in 20 years, ever looked me in the eye and asked, "Are you happy?" There was one person, only one. My grandfather, Henry Gates, my father's father. He was the retired patriarch of the family, the one who had built the business my father now ran, badly. In his old age, the family had started to treat him like a piece of antique furniture. He was old-fashioned, a little frail, probably a bit confused. Vanessa was particularly condescending to him, using that bright, slow voice people use for toddlers. But Henry was sharper than all of them combined. He was a man of few words, and he watched. He watched everything. He was the only one who saw me. He'd come over for Sunday dinners and sit at the head of the table, quiet, observing. He saw me clear the plates while Tyler and my father talked about sports. He saw Vanessa hand me her wine glass without looking at me. He saw me rub my feet after hours of serving appetizers at the barbecue. He never said anything at the house. Instead, he'd call me. "Valentina." His voice would crackle over the phone. "I'm having trouble with my online bills. Can you come by on Saturday? I'll pay you for your time." He never needed help with his bills. He was just giving me an excuse to escape, and a way to earn money they couldn't touch. I'd sit in his study, a room that smelled of old books and pipe tobacco, and he'd ask me the one question the rest of the family avoided like a plague. "What do you want, Valentina?" The first time he asked, I cried. I was 15. "I want to go to college," I whispered. "I want to be a writer, or maybe an accountant." "Good," he'd nod, his eyes clear and focused. "Accounting is smart. Know the money. Never let anyone else control your money." He was the one who taught me. While my father was teaching Tyler how to grip a golf club, my grandfather was teaching me how to read a contract. He showed me his own ledgers. He explained compound interest. He made me open a separate, hidden savings account at a different bank. "Never sign anything that makes you smaller, child," he'd say, his voice firm. "And never let them make you feel guilty for what is yours." He saw the financial abuse long before I had a name for it. He'd make me tell him every time they borrowed money. He'd just nod, his jaw tightening, and write it down in a small black notebook. "For the record," he'd mutter. I didn't know it then, but he was already meeting with his lawyers. He saw the storm that was coming. I understood my role in that house perfectly. I was the ghost in the machine. I was the invisible engine that made the happy family poster run. My wants, my energy, my money, they were the fuel. In my family, my invisibility was their greatest asset. My Saturdays were my own. That was the one boundary I had managed to draw, and only because Grandpa Henry had drawn it for me. It started when I was 14. He called the house line, and when Vanessa answered, he'd used his fading patriarch voice. "Vanessa, my dear, I hate to be a bother, but my eyes are just not what they used to be. I can't make heads or tails of these confounded online statements. Could Valentina possibly pop over for an hour on Saturday, just to read the fine print for an old man?" Vanessa, eager to be seen as the dutiful daughter-in-law to the family's figurehead, would agree instantly. "Oh, of course. Henry, it's the least she can do. She's got nothing else going on. Valentina, your grandfather needs you." So every Saturday, from 10 in the morning until noon, I would escape to his house. It was a smaller, older home on the other side of Willow Creek. One of the original structures from the 1950s. It still smelled like my grandmother. old books, Earl Grey tea, and a faint, sweet trace of cold pipe tobacco. It was the only place I could breathe. I would sit at his heavy oak desk, him in his worn leather armchair, and I'd read his mail. "This one's from the electric company. Grandpa. Just the standard bill. This is a pre-approval for a credit card. Junk." He would just nod, listening, watching me. Those first few months, we barely talked. I just read, sorted, and filed. I was just happy to be in a quiet room, performing a task that had a clear beginning and a clear end, and that would earn me a crisp $20 bill at the end, which he'd press into my hand. "For your time, Valentina. My time is valuable. So is yours." He was the only one who ever paid me for my labor. One rainy Saturday in November, I must have been 17. I was taking off my soaked sneakers by his door, trying not to get the mud on his Persian rug. I didn't realize he was watching me until he spoke. "Those shoes have seen better days, child." I froze, tucking my foot behind my other leg. The sole on my left shoe was separating near the toe, and I'd used super glue to hold it together. The glue had given up that morning, and my sock was soaked. They were a cheap pair I'd bought 2 years prior with my own bookstore money. "They're fine, Grandpa. Just a little wet." I forced a smile. "They're my comfy ones." "Comfortable and falling apart are two different things," he said. Not unkindly. He didn't press it. He just gestured to his desk. "Let's get to the mail." I sat down, my damp foot cold on the hardwood, feeling a familiar, hot shame prickle my neck. I couldn't ask my father for new shoes, not when Tyler's new custom baseball cleats, which had cost over $300, were sitting by our own front door. Asking for a $40 pair of sneakers would have triggered a lecture from Vanessa about frivolous spending and priorities. We worked in silence for half an hour. I read a newsletter from his pension fund. I filed his water bill. The quiet in the room was usually a comfort, but today it felt heavy. I could feel his eyes on me. Finally, he put down his unlit pipe and leaned forward. "Valentina," he said, his voice quiet, "I want to ask you something, and I want a real answer." I looked up. "Okay. If you didn't have to worry about anyone else, if your father was fine, and Vanessa was fine, and Tyler was taken care of, if you had all the money you needed and all the time in the world, what would you do?" The question was so enormous, so impossible. It knocked the breath out of me. No one had ever framed a question like that. My entire life was built around the needs of others. "What do you want?" was a foreign language. I stared at the grain of the oak desk. I don't know." "Humor me," he said. I thought about my hidden journals. I thought about the satisfying click of the adding machine at the bookstore. "I think I'd write," I said, the words feeling strange and heavy on my tongue. Or maybe I'd be an accountant. I like when things add up. I like when the numbers balance and everything is fair, in its right place. He stared at me for a long time, a look on his face I couldn't quite decipher. It was a mixture of deep sadness and a kind of sharp, calculating pride. "Accounting," he finally said, nodding slowly. "That's good. That's very smart. A person who understands their own books can't be cheated." That day, the lessons changed. He still had me read his bills, but he also had me balance his checkbook. He pulled out his old ledgers from the 70s, from before the business was computerized, and taught me double-entry bookkeeping. Debits on the left, credits on the right. Everything has an opposite. Everything must balance. He started quizzing me. "Vanessa mentioned she's adding you to her main credit card as an authorized user," he'd say casually, flipping through a magazine. "Yeah," I'd say, happy for the sign of trust. "She said it's for emergencies, and to help me build my credit." "That's one way to see it," he'd mutter. "Another way to see it is that if she defaults, it ruins your credit, not just hers, but if you're just an authorized user, you're not liable for the debt. Now, if she asks you to co-sign, what do you say?" I say, "No." You say no. You say it's against your policy. You say your accountant won't let you. Make up an accountant if you have to. You never, ever co-sign. Not for family, not for God. You don't tie your ship to a sinking one. He taught me about ownership. If your name isn't on the title, it isn't your car. Valentina, if your name isn't on the deed, it isn't your house. Don't pay a mortgage on a house that isn't yours. But it's the family house, I argued, repeating the line Vanessa and my father always used. There is no such thing as a family house, he said, his voice suddenly sharp. There is joint tenancy, there is tenancy in common, and there is sole ownership. Family is an emotional term, not a legal one. They are using an emotional term to get you to make a financial mistake. He had a phrase he repeated, over and over, until it was burned into my memory. Never sign anything that makes you smaller. He was listening, while the rest of the family saw him as a frail old man who needed his mail read. He was listening to every word I said, and every word I didn't say. He noticed how Vanessa talked about my bookstore money. "Oh, it's so sweet," she'd trill at Thanksgiving. "Valentina's little fund is paying for all the appetizers." He heard her. He saw how she framed my savings as a communal petty cash drawer. He'd ask me casual questions during our Saturday sessions. "So, what's new at home?" "Not much. Tyler's new travel baseball team is expensive. Vanessa's stressed. I gave her my last 2 paychecks to cover the uniform fees." Grandpa would just nod, turn to his desk, and write something down in his small black notebook. "How was your birthday?" It was quiet. Vanessa said they were a little tight. So instead of a gift, they're just going to let me handle the catering bill for my own party, as my contribution. He'd nod. He'd open the notebook. Scribble, scribble. The rest of the family treated him like a prop. They'd seat him at the head of the table, a symbolic gesture, but they'd talk around him. They'd pat his hand and ask if he was comfortable. Vanessa was the worst, all bright smiles and patronizing sweetness. "Henry, can I get you a little more water? Are you following the conversation, dear?" They all thought he was weak, half senile, lost in the past. I knew he was a hawk. He was a lion in winter, and he was watching his kingdom crumble under the mismanagement of his son and the ambition of his son's new wife. He was sharper, smarter, and more ruthless than all of them put together. He was just biding his time. The moment it all clicked for him, I remember it. I think he does too. It was another one of those sprawling family barbecues. I was 19, home from my first year of community college, the only college I could afford by combining my bookstore savings with the money Henry had been paying me. Vanessa had been furious. "Community college looks so cheap, Valentina. It's embarrassing. Why can't you just stay home and help me? You can take classes online later." But I'd gone anyway. That day, I was on my feet for 6 hours. I'd been tasked with serving 24 relatives. I was carrying a heavy tray of empty glasses and sticky plates, my back aching, my face slick with sweat. The sun was beating down. I passed the patio table where the adults were sitting. Vanessa was the center of attention. Of course, she was laughing, her head thrown back, a full glass of white wine in her hand. She was telling a story about her decorator. My father was laughing with her. My aunts were hanging on her every word. Not one of them looked at me. I was just the help, moving through their line of sight, invisible. But as I turned to go inside, my eyes met my grandfather's. He was sitting at the end of the table, his chair slightly in the shade. He wasn't laughing. He was watching me. He watched me hoist the heavy tray. He watched Vanessa, laughing, completely oblivious. He watched my father, so enchanted by his new wife that he didn't even see his own daughter buckling under the weight. I saw the look in his eyes. It was a look of cold, quiet, absolute clarity. It was the look of a CEO who has just identified the rot in his company. In that moment, he saw the entire dynamic, stark and ugly. He saw my servitude, and he saw her casual, smiling cruelty. He just gave me a very small, very slow nod, and he looked away. The next Saturday, when I showed up, he wasn't in his armchair. He was at the desk, on the phone. "No, that's not what I want," he was saying, his voice not frail at all, but sharp. commanding. I want it structured as an irrevocable trust. Correct. Sole beneficiary. Valentina Gates. I want a specific clause. Write this down. A specific clause protecting the principal from any and all claims, familial or otherwise, and a penalty for duress, if any family member attempts to coerce, threaten, or physically harm her into signing, yes, they are immediately and permanently disinherited from my personal estate, all of it. My blood went cold. I stood frozen in the doorway. He looked up, saw me, and held up a finger, motioning for me to sit. Yes, that's correct. Mr. Collins, he said into the phone. Draw it up. I'll be in on Monday to sign. He hung up the phone and looked at me. The confused old man was gone. In his place was Henry Gates, the man who had built an empire from nothing. Grandpa, I whispered. Valentina, he said, folding his hands on the desk. I need you to do something for me. I need you to keep every bank statement, every pay stub, every receipt for every loan you give to Vanessa and your father. I want you to email yourself summaries of every conversation where they ask you for money. I want a record. A record? For what? I was completely lost. He sighed, the sharpness leaving his face, replaced by that familiar, weary sadness. Because, child, I've seen this story before. People like Vanessa. They are locusts. They eat everything. Right now. You're just a small garden. But I've spent my life building a harvest. He tapped a thick stack of papers on his desk, his will. I'm not going to be here forever, he said. And the day I'm gone, they are going to come for you. They will see you as the last obstacle between them and my money. They will try to get you to sign things. They will tell you it's for the family. They will threaten you. They will charm you. They will bully you. He leaned forward. They're going to come for your money. Valentina, the money you've earned, and the money I'm going to leave you, and I am preparing you for that day. He had been. All those lessons about contracts, all those warnings about co-signing. And then he revealed the final piece. I've been working with my attorney, Mr. Collins. We have set up a trust fund for you. It's separate from my main will. It's protected. It's funded. It's yours, and yours alone. And it becomes active the moment you need it. He had been preparing. He knew, long before I did, that the day would come when they would stop asking and start demanding. He knew that one day, their manipulation would escalate. And he was building me a fortress. He was handing me a sword. He was the only one who saw me, and he was the only one who knew I needed to be saved. Grandpa Henry passed away 6 months ago. It was a Tuesday in January, cold and clear. He died in his sleep, sitting in his worn leather armchair, the Saturday papers still folded neatly on his lap. I was the one who found him. I'd let myself in for our usual Saturday session, but the house was silent and cold. The $20 bill he always left for me was on the desk, weighted down by his pipe. The funeral was exactly what you'd expect from Willow Creek. Expensive flowers, tasteful black suits, and quiet, polite grief. Vanessa was the star. Of course, playing the role of the bereaved daughter-in-law, accepting condolences with a practiced, tragic grace. My father just looked gray and lost, a ship without his rudder. A week later, I found myself in a high-rise office downtown, sitting across from a man named Mr. Collins. He was Henry's attorney, a sharp man with kind eyes who didn't waste time. Your grandfather was a very meticulous man. Valentina, he said, sliding a thick, leather-bound binder across the polished mahogany table. He wanted you to be the only one present for this. This is the irrevocable trust he established for you 5 years ago. It is separate from his primary will. I opened the binder. I had been preparing myself for this. Thanks to Henry's lessons, I expected a college fund. I expected enough to get a small apartment. I was not prepared for the numbers I saw. I read the principal amount, and my vision blurred. I had to read it again, counting the zeros. It wasn't college money. It was fly to another continent and never be found. Money. It was enough to buy a house, start 3 businesses, and live comfortably for the rest of my life without ever punching a clock. My hands started to shake. I looked up at Mr. Collins, my throat dry. Why? Your grandfather called it escape velocity money, Mr. Collins said, his expression softening. He anticipated you would one day need the ability to achieve a clean orbit, and he put in protections, very specific, ironclad protections. He turned a page and pointed. There, in dense legal language, was the clause, the one I had overheard him dictating, a section detailing that any attempt by a family member to coerce, threaten, or physically harm me in an attempt to gain access to the funds would result in their immediate and permanent disinheritance from Henry's personal estate, the house, the stocks, the business. I finally broke down. The tears weren't for the money. They were for him. He had seen it all coming. He had known. And he had built me a fortress. The trust was supposed to be private. It was designed to be silent. But in my family, silence is just a vacuum, and secrets are a commodity. The leak came, as it always does, from a weak link. A distant cousin who worked as a teller at the bank managing the trust saw the account activate. She saw the transfer of assets. She made one excited, whispering phone call to her mother, my Aunt Clara. Aunt Clara, the family's primary gossip, immediately called Vanessa. The shift was seismic. It was instantaneous, and it was the most terrifying thing I have ever witnessed. Overnight, I went from being the invisible, irritating furniture to being Vanessa's most cherished person. The disdain she usually held for me, the impatience and mild contempt, evaporated. It was replaced by a thick, cloying sweetness that made my skin crawl. Valentina, honey, she'd call out, her voice a full octave higher than usual. I saved you the last of the imported coffee. I know you love it. I hated that coffee. She started touching me, a hand on my shoulder as she passed, a pat on my arm. We just worry about you, sweetie, all alone, managing, well, all of that. It must be so overwhelming for you. You know your father and I are here to help you carry that burden. I was no longer the help. I was the burden, a very, very valuable burden. My father, Greg, took a different approach. He was, as always, Vanessa's hapless lieutenant. He cornered me in the study one night, a room I hadn't been in since Henry's death, trying to look stern and fatherly. Valentina, he said, closing the doors, a gesture of false confidentiality. We need to talk about this situation, this money. It's a private trust, Dad. Nothing is private in a family. Val, he said, pacing. We are a unit. We move as one. What we need here is financial unity. I recognized the phrase. It was pure Vanessa, fed to him over dinner. We need a strategy, he continued, gaining steam. For the whole family's future, your grandfather, God rest his soul, he was old. He didn't understand modern finances. This money can't just sit there. It needs to be managed. It needs to be put to work. For all of us. He wanted the account numbers. He wanted to help me manage it. He wanted control. Tyler, now 22, was far more direct. He had recently been in between opportunities, after being fired from the pro shop for treating it like his personal lounge. He found me where I was most comfortable, and where he knew I'd be, in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher. Hey, Val, he said, leaning against the counter, popping open a soda. So, I heard you're rich now. That's pretty wild. I'm not rich, Tyler. Sure, okay. He took a long, noisy sip. Look, Grandpa was cool, but he was old. He probably wanted us to share it, you know? I mean, it's not like you earned it. He just gave it to you. It's for the family. It helps the family. It helps the family. That was the new anthem. The specific help was identified 3 days later at dinner. Tyler was scrolling through his phone, a smug look on his face. Oh, man, this is it, he said, turning the phone around. On the screen was a gleaming black, monstrously large SUV. It was the kind of car movie stars take to the Oscars, with tinted windows and wheels that cost more than my community college tuition. A quick search showed it started at $65,000. Isn't it sick? He beamed. Oh, that's beautiful. Ty, Vanessa chimed in, leaning over to look. And it's so safe. She turned her bright, predatory gaze on me. Tyler needs a reliable, safe car. Valentina. For his job interviews. You know what they say, presentation is everything. He can't keep showing up in that old sedan. It's embarrassing for him. My father nodded, taking a bite of the casserole I had made. It's a good investment. Val, a solid American vehicle, good for the whole family. They discussed it for several minutes. The gas mileage, the leather interior, the sound system. They were spending my money, in front of my face, as if I were a line item in their budget. I put my fork down. The small sound it made on the porcelain plate was shockingly loud. No, I said. The conversation stopped. The three of them stared at me. Tyler looked confused. Vanessa's practiced smile twitched. My father's face began to cloud over. What did you just say? My father asked, his voice dangerously quiet. I said no, I repeated, my voice shaking, but my gaze firm. I'm not buying him a car. Vanessa let out a brittle laugh. Oh, Valentina, don't be dramatic. Of course you are. It's for your brother. It's the least you can do. He's not my brother, I said. The words were out before I could stop them. And it's my money. Grandpa left it to me. The answer is no. That did it. My father slammed his hand on the table, making the glasses jump. Don't you dare, he growled, his face turning a dark, blotchy red. Don't you dare talk like that in this house, after everything this family has done for you, after Vanessa welcomed you, raised you. She didn't raise me, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I raised myself, and I helped raise her son. That is betrayal, he yelled, standing up so fast his chair screeched on the floor. That is what this is. You are betraying your grandfather's memory, and you are betraying this family. You will not break this family apart over a damned car. I'm not the one breaking it, I said, standing up too. You are, by asking. He just stared at me, his chest heaving. He looked at me like I was a stranger, a snake he'd found in his own house. He sputtered, unable to form a word, then just turned and stormed out of the dining room. Tyler shot me a look of pure disgust. You're unbelievable. Val, just, wow. He grabbed his phone and followed his hero. I was left alone at the table with Vanessa. She didn't move. She didn't raise her voice. She just sat there, calmly swirling the red wine in her glass, a cold, thoughtful smile on her face. The mask was gone. The scary sweet had evaporated, replaced by the shark underneath. She let the silence hang for a full minute, just staring at me. You think you're very clever, don't you? She finally said, her voice a low, soft purr. You and that old man. You think you're protected. You think Henry saved you. She took a sip of her wine. But Henry is dead, and I am right here. She tried a different tactic a few days later. She called a family meeting, just the four of us, in the formal living room, the one with the white carpet that no one was allowed to walk on. She had her laptop. She had made a PowerPoint presentation. I sat on the stiff sofa, my hands clenched in my lap, as she clicked through slides titled, The Gates Family Future, a Joint Investment Strategy. It was a meticulous plan to drain my trust fund. Slide 1. Consolidation. This involved moving my assets into a new family-managed joint account. Managed by her, of course. Slide 2. Seed funding. This was a $50,000 investment in Tyler's new business venture. He wanted to be a high-end sneaker reseller. Slide 3. Capital assets. This was the $65,000 SUV, now relabeled as a company car for Tyler's non-existent business. Slide 4. Home improvements. A new deck, an outdoor kitchen, and a vague landscaping update. My contribution to this plan was 100%. Their contribution was 0. So, you see, she finished, smiling brightly as if she'd just solved world hunger, It's a win-win. We all grow together, as a family. I'm not doing it, Vanessa, I said. I'm not giving you access to the trust. I'm not buying the car. I'm not funding the deck. The answer is no. Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes went dead. Valentina, she said, her voice dropping to that terrifyingly soft, intimate tone. If you love this family, if you have one single shred of gratitude for the roof I have kept over your head, for the food I have put in your mouth for 15 years, you will help your brother. She leaned in. You will do this for your father. He is not a young man. This kind of stress, this kind of rejection from his only daughter. His heart isn't strong. Valentina, this kind of selfishness from you, it could be devastating. There it was, the real threat. Do this, or you'll be responsible for what happens to him. Do this, or you will be the one who kills your father. I looked at her perfectly coiffed hair, at her cold blue eyes, and I finally understood. I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't even the invisible help. I was a bank. I was a walking, breathing ATM that had just been topped up with a massive inheritance, and my entire worth, my entire place in this house, was based on my willingness to dispense cash on demand. I was the bank, and I was the unpaid janitor who kept the bank clean. Vanessa saw my silence and mistook it for surrender. She thought she'd found the crack, the lever of guilt she could use to pry me open. She stood up, closing her laptop with a satisfied snap. You know, she said, her voice light and airy again. The 4th of July barbecue is in 2 weeks. The entire family will be here, all our friends, the neighbors, everyone. She placed a hand on my shoulder, her nails digging in just slightly, a tiny reminder of her power. Why don't we do it then? We'll make it a celebration. We'll get all the paperwork for the car. Just the car. We can start small, and you can surprise Tyler. In front of everyone, a big, generous gesture. You can sign the papers right there at the party. She smiled, a wide, triumphant beam. It will show everyone, how much you love this family. It will make your father so proud. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a perfectly laid trap. She was going to put me on a stage, in front of 30 relatives. She was going to hand me a pen and a contract. If I signed, she won. She got the car. She got her foot in the door of my trust, and she proved to everyone that she was still in control. And if I refused, in front of all of them, I would be the monster. I would be the cold-hearted, greedy stepdaughter who humiliated her brother and broke her father's heart over a simple car, ruining a national holiday. She had checkmated me. I looked up at her and forced my lips into a smile. That's a great idea. Vanessa, a celebration. It sounds perfect. She practically glowed. She thought she had won. She didn't know about Mr. Collins. She didn't know about the clause. She didn't know about the black notebook I'd kept for the last 5 years, filled with dates and times and amounts, just like Henry had told me to. Vanessa was setting a stage. She was planning a public execution. She just didn't realize I was the one who had built the gallows. The lie tasted like sugar on my tongue. That's a great idea, Vanessa. A celebration. It sounds perfect. She bought it. Her victory was so total, so absolute in her mind, that she couldn't detect the steel under my surrender. For the next 2 weeks, the house was almost pleasant, as long as you didn't look too closely. Vanessa was magnanimous in her victory, treating me with the polite condescension of a queen who has just successfully negotiated a very favorable treaty. I, in turn, played the part of the dutifully defeated. I nodded. I smiled. I confirmed catering orders. And the very next morning, I told her I was going to the public library to research investment options, to show her I was serious. I didn't go to the library. I drove 45 minutes to a town where no one knew my name and walked into a bustling anonymous coffee shop. Mr. Collins was already there, sitting in a corner booth, looking decidedly out of place in his pinstripe suit, nursing a small black coffee. I sat down, my heart hammering against my ribs. I didn't say hello. I just slid my phone across the Formica table. She's planning to do it at the 4th of July party, I said, my voice low. She's calling it a surprise celebration for Tyler. Mr. Collins put on a pair of reading glasses and began to scroll. I had compiled everything, the screenshots of the texts from Vanessa, each one a masterclass in emotional blackmail. Your father is just so proud of your generous heart. It will mean the world to Tyler. He's had such a rough go. Then, the texts from my father, which were worse. Don't disappoint us. Valentina, this is important for family unity. You're part of a team. Val, we all have to pull our weight. And finally, the ones from Tyler himself. Hey, just sign the stupid paper so I can get the truck. Don't make this weird. Mr. Collins read every single one, his expression unreadable. When he finally looked up, his jaw was tight. This is comprehensive, he said, his voice flat. This is exactly what your grandfather predicted. He had a name for it. He called it the full court press. Can they do it? I whispered, my hands cold. Can they sue me? Can they get the money? Can they claim I'm incompetent or something? No, Mr. Collins said, with such absolute finality that some of the tension drained from my shoulders. The trust is irrevocable. It's a fortress. Your grandfather structured it so that you are the sole beneficiary, and only you can authorize a withdrawal. They cannot sue the trust. They cannot claim you are incompetent without a full medical and psychological review, which, given your grades and employment history, they would be laughed out of court for attempting. The money is safe, Valentina. I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for 6 months. So I just keep saying no? You could, he said, taking a slow sip of his coffee. But that's not the most interesting part. Henry was a brilliant man. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a strategist. He didn't just build you a fortress to hide in. Valentina, he built a trap. He leaned forward, and his lawyerly demeanor was replaced by the ghost of my grandfather's shrewdness. You remember the clause I mentioned? I nodded, my throat tightening, the one I had overheard him dictating, the one I had clung to, hoping it was real. It is very real, Mr. Collins said. I drafted it myself, to his exact specifications. He called it the duress and coercion clause. He named them specifically, your father, Greg Gates, your stepmother, Vanessa Gates, and your stepbrother, Tyler. If any or all of them are found to have used undue emotional, financial, or physical duress to coerce you into signing away or accessing the principle of your trust. He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. They are immediately, automatically, and permanently disinherited from his personal estate, all of it. I couldn't breathe. His personal estate? But that's everything, Mr. Collins confirmed. The business, the entire stock portfolio, and yes, the house in Willow Creek they are currently living in, everything your father was set to inherit. It all defaults to a secondary beneficiary. Who? He almost smiled. The Willow Creek Animal Shelter and the City Library. Your grandmother's 2 favorite charities. It hit me then, the sheer, overwhelming scale of his foresight. He hadn't just given me a shield. He had wired the entire estate to explode if they so much as laid a hand on me. He had given them the rope, and he knew, with chilling certainty, that they would use it to hang themselves. The tears finally came. I'd cried from humiliation in the kitchen. I'd cried from grief in his study. But these were different. These were cold, heavy tears of a love so profound and so calculating that it reached back from the grave to protect me. He knew, I whispered, the coffee cup blurring in front of me. He knew they would do this. He knew, Mr. Collins said, his voice gentle. He hoped he was wrong, but he never, ever planned on it. I wiped my face, the fear I'd been carrying for weeks suddenly replaced by a cold, hard resolve. So what do I do, Mr. Collins? Do I send them a letter? Do I have you warn them? Tell them about the clause? No, he said, shaking his head. Absolutely not. You don't warn a bear about a bear trap. You let it walk in. A warning letter gives them time to lawyer up, to change their story. They'll pivot. They'll claim you're the one blackmailing them with your inheritance. No, we let them proceed. We let Vanessa stage her celebration. We let them bully you. We let them hand you the pen in front of everyone. Expose themselves in front of the whole family? In front of me, Mr. Collins said. I stared at him. You? You're coming to the barbecue? He allowed himself a thin, rare smile. Your grandfather's final instruction to me, in our last ever meeting, was this. When the day comes, Collins, and it will come, they're going to throw a party to skin that girl alive. I want you to be there. I want you to be in the room when they spring the trap. He then handed me a crisp $100 bill. What for? He said, buy a terrible Hawaiian shirt. I want you to blend in. The plan was set. I wouldn't fight. I wouldn't argue. I would let the party happen. I would let them hand me the pen. And Mr. Collins would be standing by the grill, holding a paper plate, watching. I left that coffee shop a different person. The victim was gone. In her place was a strategist. This wasn't a family drama anymore. This was a heist. I was planning my own extraction. My first stop was a different bank, a national chain. One Henry had no affiliation with. I used the money from my bookstore job to open a new checking account and a savings account, linked to a new post office box I rented downtown. It was sterile, anonymous, and most importantly, invisible. My second stop was my trust's bank. I met with my advisor and authorized a single transfer of $50,000 from the trust principal to my new, unlinked account. For a real estate investment, I lied. It was my Go Fund. It was escape velocity. My third stop was an apartment complex downtown, the kind of modern, characterless building Vanessa would find distasteful. It was above a Thai restaurant, and the hallway smelled vaguely of curry and lemongrass. It was perfect. I signed a 6-month lease, paid the deposit, and first and last month's rent from my new account. The keys felt heavy and real in my hand. My move-in date was July 5th, the day after the party. My fourth stop was a call. I needed an internal witness, an ally. My cousins were mostly carbon copies of their parents. Loud, superficial, entitled, all except one, Zoe, my second cousin. She was quiet, an artist, the weird one who always sat with me at Thanksgiving, sketching on a napkin. She'd seen the dynamic her whole life. I called her. Zoe, it's Valentina. Hey, Val, what's up? I need a favor, I said, my voice flat. A big one. At the barbecue on the 4th. I need you to stand near me when the gift for Tyler is announced. There was a long pause. Oh, God, she finally said, her voice full of a weariness I recognized. It's the car, isn't it? My mom's been bragging about it. They're really going to make you do it, aren't they? They're going to try, I said. I need you to record it, with your phone. Whatever happens, just record. Consider it done, Zoe said, a new hardness in her own voice. They're monsters. Val, I'll be your backup. Just tell me where to stand. The final step was preparing my arsenal. That night, I went to my room. I pulled out the black notebook Henry had made me keep for the last 5 years. I opened my laptop and printed everything, the bank statements showing the loans I'd given Vanessa, the receipts, the screenshots of the text messages. I compiled it all into a single, thick manila envelope, my case file. It's now the night of July 3rd. The house is vibrating with frantic energy. Vanessa is on the phone, confirming the balloon arch delivery. My father is outside, obsessively power washing the flagstone patio. Tyler, for his part, has already been test driving the exact SUV he's been promised. I'm in my room, this room, with its pale pink walls I've hated since I was 12. It's not my room. It's a stage set for a person I'm not. I pull my old college backpack from the back of the closet. I begin to pack. My laptop, the manila envelope of evidence, my passport, my birth certificate, my social security card, the new checkbook and debit card for my secret bank account, The keys to the apartment above the Thai restaurant, 3 changes of clothes, rolled tight, my toothbrush, and finally, the last 10 $20 bills Henry ever paid me for reading his mail, which I'd kept pressed inside a copy of Pride and Prejudice, cash. It's a go bag. I feel like a fugitive, but I'm really a prisoner planning a jailbreak. I walk quietly down the back stairs. I go to my old dented sedan, the one I bought myself, the one Vanessa hates parking in her driveway. I open the trunk, lift the flimsy carpet, and place the backpack next to the spare tire. I cover it with an old blanket. I walk back inside. The house smells like lemon-scented floor wax and simmering entitlement. I go upstairs to the bathroom. I stop at the hallway mirror. I look at my reflection. The girl looking back is pale, her hair pulled back in a simple, functional ponytail. She looks tired. She looks like the quiet one, the responsible one, the helper. But my eyes are not my own. They're my grandfather's. They are clear, and they are focused, and they are not afraid. "Valentina!" Vanessa's voice shrieks from the foot of the stairs, sharp and demanding. "I need you to polish the good silver, all of it. We want to make a good impression tomorrow." I look at the girl in the mirror. "Tomorrow," I whisper, a promise to her, to me, to Henry. Tomorrow, they finally see who I really am. I turn away from the mirror and walk downstairs. One last time, to polish the silver I will never touch again. The 4th of July, in Willow Creek. That means 3 things: professionally catered barbecue, aggressively patriotic bunting, and a suffocating passive-aggressive humidity you could cut with a knife. Our house, their house, was the epicenter. The backyard was a stage set for the American dream. The pool was a sheet of turquoise glass, white roses, Vanessa's signature, spilled from expensive-looking rustic pots. The air was thick with the dueling smells of chlorine, hickory smoke, and the cloyingly sweet perfume of my aunts. A playlist of tasteful classic rock drifted from invisible speakers. And I was the help. "Valentina, honey, the appetizers," Vanessa called, her voice a cheerful trill from across the patio. I nodded, hoisting the heavy wooden tray. My go-bag was safe in the trunk of my car, parked 2 streets over. Here, I was in my old uniform, a plain black t-shirt, denim shorts, and the comfortable, worn-out sneakers Henry had once pointed out. They were practical. They were invisible. I moved through the crowd of 30-plus relatives and close family friends. They were all dressed in expensive-looking linen, holding sweating glasses of Chardonnay. They smiled at me, but not to me. I was just the hands that delivered the bacon-wrapped scallops. I saw Tyler holding court by the pool. He was surrounded by our younger cousins, all of them wrapped. He was pantomiming, steering a massive truck, his voice cutting across the music. And it's not even the base model. It's the fully loaded, top-of-the-line V8. Valentina's hooking it up. He laughed. A loud, braying sound. He'd been insufferable for 2 weeks, walking around with the swagger of a king who had just secured his new territory. I saw Vanessa, a vision in a white linen sundress, floating from group to group, her laughter bright and practiced. "Oh, Greg is just so proud of Tyler. He's got such a good head for business on his shoulders," she was saying to an uncle. My father was at the grill, fulfilling his one and only domestic duty of the year. He was wearing a Kiss the Cook apron, which felt like a bitter joke. He was bragging to a neighbor about Tyler's newfound sense of responsibility. Every word was a lie, polished and presented like one of the perfect silver platters I had shined last night. I felt a slight bump against my arm as I set the empty tray down by the kitchen door. It was Zoe. She was dressed in black, as usual, and looked deeply uncomfortable. She didn't look at me, just pretended to be grabbing a napkin. "I'm by the sliding glass door," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Got a clear view of the whole table. The phone is in my pocket, set to video, ready to go." "Thank you, Zoe," I murmured. "If they try anything," she whispered, her voice hardening, "we record. We burn them to the ground." I gave her the smallest possible nod and turned back to the fray. My heart a cold. Steady drum. My ally was in place. I scanned the crowd, my eyes searching, and then I saw him. He was standing near the grill, looking completely lost. Mr. Collins. He was wearing a Hawaiian shirt so loud it hurt my eyes. A nauseating pattern of bright yellow pineapples and blue toucans. He was holding a paper plate with a single, sad-looking hot dog on it, which he was examining as if it were a legal brief. He looked like exactly what he was supposed to be. Someone's awkward +1. He was perfect. He saw me look, and his eyes met mine for a quarter of a second. There was no recognition, no nod. He just turned back to his hot dog. The trap was armed. At the head of the long, beautifully set dining table was the guest of honor, an empty chair. Vanessa had placed a single, framed photo of Grandpa Henry on the table, next to a small vase with a single white rose. "We're saving a seat for Henry, of course," she had announced to the first guests who arrived. "He loved a good party. He's here with us in spirit." I looked at the chair, that specific high-backed rattan chair. It was the one he always sat in. The man at the head of the table controls the conversation. Valentina. He'd told me once, over a game of checkers, "Don't you ever let them seat you in the middle." They had left the seat of power empty, turning it into a maudlin shrine. The irony was so bitter it almost made me laugh. Vanessa found me by the drink station, where I was refilling a pitcher of iced tea. She put her hand on my arm, her nails pressing in just enough to be a reminder. "Valentina, darling," she cooed, "you shouldn't be working so hard. You, of all people, should be relaxing. This whole day is really in your honor. You know, your generosity." This was the first probe, the first attempt to get me to confirm the narrative in public. "It's a party for the 4th of July. Vanessa," I said, my voice flat, not looking up from the ice. "Someone has to make sure people have drinks." "You're just so responsible," she said, her voice dripping with artificial honey. She was trying to box me in. "We are all just so moved by what you're doing for your brother. It's a testament to this family." "Is the ice bucket full enough?" I asked, pulling my arm away. Her smile twitched. I wasn't playing the game. I wasn't being the grateful, generous daughter. I was just being the help. She let out a tiny, frustrated sigh. "Yes, dear, that's fine. Just try to mingle. It's a party." She swept away, and I watched her go. I caught my father's eye. He was standing by the table, talking to Tyler. He gave me a sharp, warning look, the look of a general whose soldier is out of step. Then he patted his chest. His sport coat, worn despite the heat, had a slight rectangular bulge in the inner pocket. The envelope, the contract, the weapon was ready. I could hear my cousins at the other end of the patio. I mean, can you imagine? A $65,000 truck? Just, here you go? My God, I wish I had a stepsister like that. I had to beg my dad for a cosign on a used Jetta. The narrative was set. The jury of my peers was already convinced. I was the family's patron saint of finance. To say no now would make me a devil. The sun began to dip below the perfect tree line, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The tiki torches were lit, their flames reflecting in the still water of the pool. The air grew heavy, the humidity clinging to my skin. The chatter was louder now, fueled by 3 hours of steady drinking. The air was stretched thin, taut. I felt like I was walking on a piano wire. Then, the sound, the sharp, clear ding-ding-ding of a knife against a wine glass. Vanessa. She was standing next to Henry's empty chair, beaming at the crowd. "Everyone! Oh, everyone! Can I have your attention, please?" The music faded. The conversations died. One by one, 35 faces, slick with sweat and wine, turned to look at her. Thank you, she said, her voice ringing with performative emotion. "If everyone could please find a seat at the table. Dinner is served, and, after dinner, we have a very, very special announcement, a real testament to what family truly means." My father moved to stand beside her, his hand in his pocket. Tyler, his face flushed with excitement and victory, slid into the chair right next to mine, his knee bouncing. "This is going to be epic," he muttered. Not to me, but to the world. A hush fell over the backyard. All the air had been sucked out of the night. The only sounds were the distant pop of fireworks from another neighborhood and the hum of the pool filter. Vanessa, a goddess in her white linen, gestured for me to sit. I took my seat. They had placed me in the center of the long table, a sacrifice at the altar. Across from me, gleaming in the torchlight, sat Grandpa Henry's empty chair. The trap was sprung. The trial was about to begin. My father, Greg, stood up. He was flushed, his smile too wide, his movements unsteady from an afternoon of expensive Merlot. He picked up a steak knife and tapped it, ding ding ding, against his wine glass. The sound was sharp, demanding. "Friends! Family!" he boomed, his voice echoing across the now quiet patio. The 35 faces turned toward him, illuminated by the flickering torchlight. "Thank you all for coming. It's a beautiful night, and it's always wonderful to celebrate this great country." Polite, scattered applause. Vanessa, beside him, was beaming, her eyes fixed on me like a predator that has finally cornered its prey. "But tonight," my father continued, his voice taking on a new, sentimental thickness, "we have something else to celebrate. We're celebrating what really matters. Family." He raised his glass, not to the crowd, but to me. Directly at me, I was pinned. "Tonight, my daughter, Valentina, has a very special gift for her brother, Tyler, a gift that shows what this family is all about: unity, support." He paused for dramatic effect. "Valentina has a little surprise for Tyler tonight." The applause was immediate and loud. My aunts and uncles, who had all been briefed, clapped and cheered. "Bravo, Valentina!" my Uncle Mark shouted. "Way to step up." Tyler, sitting next to me, was vibrating. He let out a loud whoop and grinned, his face shining with sweat and pure, unadulterated entitlement. He was a king, and his coronation was complete. This was his victory, and in his mind, it was already a done deal. Vanessa put her hand on my shoulder, her nails dug into my skin. "Stand up, honey," she hissed, her voice a joyful command. "Let them see you." She didn't wait for me to respond. She grabbed my arm, just above the elbow, and yanked. I stumbled, half pulled out of my chair, a puppet on her strings. She held me there, her arm around my shoulders in a mockery of a motherly embrace, her grip like a vice. "She's just so humble," Vanessa announced to the crowd, her voice ringing with false pride. "She didn't want a big fuss, but we had to. My sweet Valentina is buying her brother a brand new car." The cheer went up. Tyler was on his feet, high-fiving our cousins. My father was nodding, smiling, the benevolent patriarch. This was the moment. The stage was set. The audience was waiting. My silence was their cue. I looked at Vanessa's smiling, triumphant face. I looked at my father, already accepting congratulations. I looked at Tyler, who was pretending to wipe a fake tear of joy from his eye. I took a breath. The air felt thick, like water. And into the wave of applause, I spoke. My voice wasn't a whisper. It wasn't a scream. It was clear and cold, and it cut through the noise like a shard of glass. I didn't agree to that. The applause died. It didn't taper off. It hit a wall and shattered. The sound of 35 people clapping just stopped. Silence. A profound, suffocating silence that was louder than any noise. The only sounds were the whoosh of the pool filter and the sudden, frantic chirping of a cricket somewhere in the dark. Someone at the far end of the table coughed. Vanessa's smile froze. Her eyes, still fixed on the crowd, widened almost imperceptibly. Her grip on my arm tightened until I was sure she would leave bruises. She was the first to recover. She let out a laugh, a high, brittle sound like breaking glass. "Oh, Valentina!" she shrieked, shaking me slightly in her embrace. She's just so shy. Look at her. She's embarrassed by all the attention. She wanted it to be a quiet, private gift, but we just had to celebrate her generous heart. She was good. She was so good. She was trying to spin it, to paint me as a bashful, modest angel, to steamroll my refusal. But my father, clumsy and drunk on his own power, was not so subtle. He was the enforcer. His smile was gone, replaced by a dark, thunderous scowl. The loving father had vanished, and the bully had taken his place. "Vanessa, that's enough," he snapped, his voice a low growl. He dropped the act. He reached into the inner pocket of his sport coat and pulled out the white business envelope. He slapped it onto the table, right on top of my dinner plate. He then took a heavy, expensive-looking pen from the same pocket and tossed it down next to the envelope. The sound was final. "Sign it," he commanded. Not to me, to the table. "She's just nervous, that's all. A little stage fright." He then looked at me. His eyes were cold, and they were full of a disgust that stole my breath. "Valentina, sign the paper, now." The entire party was frozen, a tableau of horrified smiles and wide eyes. This was no longer a celebration, it was an execution. They were all witnesses. Zoe. I saw from the corner of my eye, had her phone up, perfectly steady, pretending to be texting. Mr. Collins was still examining his hot dog, but his body was angled toward us. This was the moment, the duress, the coercion. I looked at the envelope, I looked at the pen, then I looked up at my father, at his red, furious face. I let go of the breath I was holding. No. The word was quiet, it was small, but it was definitive. It was a period at the end of a sentence I had been writing my entire life. For a full second, my father didn't seem to understand. He blinked, as if I'd spoken in a foreign language. "What? What did you just say?" "No," I said again, louder. "I'm not signing it. I'm not buying the car." It was Vanessa who moved. She didn't scream. She didn't argue. She didn't try to gaslight me. She reacted with the pure reptilian instinct of a predator whose prey had just bared its teeth. All the training, all the social grace, all the Willow Creek polish evaporated in a single violent second. She let go of my arm, and before I could even register the movement, her right hand swung in a wide, vicious arc. Her hand connected with the left side of my face. The sound was not a slap, it was a crack. It was a sharp, percussive, wet sound, like a piece of lumber splitting. It was so loud, so sharp, so utterly wrong that it seemed to hang in the humid night air, echoing off the stone patio. The world went white. The tiki torch flames blurred into streaks of light. My head snapped to the side with such force that my neck screamed in protest. Then came the pain. A bright, explosive, sickening sheet of white-hot fire that consumed my cheek, my ear, my jaw. My eyes flooded with involuntary tears, not of sadness, but of pure, physical shock. I tasted copper. My teeth had sliced the inside of my cheek. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum. 35 people had just watched a grown woman strike another grown woman in the face. I was still reeling, my vision swimming, my hand just beginning to rise to my burning face, when Tyler lunged. He didn't hit me. He grabbed me. He shot up from his chair and seized my left wrist, the one hanging limp at my side. His fingers, strong from years of golf and 0 years of real work, dug into my skin like claws. "You bitch!" he screamed, his voice cracking, his face purple with rage. "You ruined it! Don't you embarrass us! You never embarrass us!" He yanked my arm, hard, trying to pull me out of the chair, trying to drag me. The pain from my face was suddenly joined by a sharp, tearing pain in my wrist, his nails breaking the skin. I cried out, a small, choked sound. I stumbled, half falling, catching myself on the edge of the table, my plate of half-eaten food crashing to the ground. The sound of the breaking plate finally broke the spell. My Aunt Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My uncle just stared, his cigar frozen halfway to his lips. The neighbor looked at my father in pure, unadulterated horror. My father and Vanessa were frozen, too. Vanessa, her hands still raised, her chest heaving, her eyes wide with the shock of her own. Irreversible action. My father, his mouth open, finally realizing that this had gone far, far beyond his control. They had done it, in front of everyone. They had triggered the claws. And then, another sound. A new sound, one that did not belong. It wasn't a gasp, it wasn't a word. It was the deep, groaning scrape of a heavy wooden chair being pushed back against flagstone, a slow, deliberate, scraping sound that cut through the horrified silence with the finality of a judge's gavel. It was a sound of immense effort, a sound of authority. Every head at the table turned. They didn't look at me, clutching my bleeding face. They didn't look at Vanessa, her hand still tingling. They didn't look at Tyler, his hand still clamped on my wrist. Every single eye turned, as one, to the head of the table, to the high-backed rattan chair where my grandfather, Henry Gates, had been sitting silently for the past 3 hours, a plaid blanket on his lap, a man they had all ignored, dismissed as frail, and written off as senile. He was not a shrine, he was a witness, and to the absolute, jaw-dropping, heart-stopping horror of everyone present, Grandpa Henry was slowly, painfully, but with terrible, undeniable purpose, pushing himself up to his feet, the plaid blanket, the one Vanessa had insisted he use because he got so chilled, slipped from his lap and puddled onto the flagstones. It was an offering of his supposed frailty, now discarded. He planted both hands on the arms of the rattan chair, and with a low groan that was half effort, half something else, he pushed himself upright. His knuckles were white. He was not the stooped, shuffling 80-something-year-old they seated at the table like a polite antique. His back was straight. His shoulders, though slightly bowed by age, were set with a rigid military stiffness. But it was his eyes. The watery, confused eyes were gone. In their place were 2 chips of bright, glacial ice. They were clear, focused, and burning with a cold, analytical fury. The CEO was back. The man who had built a company from nothing was present. The silence on the patio was no longer just shock. It was a new, thick, terrified awe. Tyler, still clutching my wrist, saw his grandfather standing. The sight was so alien, so impossible, that his grip loosened instinctively. He let go. I stumbled back, my hand flying to my face, the fire on my cheek so intense I thought I might be sick. I was cradling my wrist, staring, just like everyone else. Henry Gates's gaze did not fall on me. Not yet. He swept his eyes across the 35 stunned faces, the relatives, the neighbors, his audience. He looked at each of them, one by one, branding them with his disappointment. Then, his gaze settled. He slowly, deliberately, raised his right hand, his finger, crooked with arthritis but steady as steel, pointed directly at Vanessa. She was still frozen, her hand halfway in the air, her chest heaving, her eyes wide with the adrenaline of her own violence. Vanessa. His voice was not a shout. It was a low, gravelly rasp that carried across the yard with the weight of absolute authority. It was the voice of a man who had never, in his entire professional life, had to repeat an order. "I saw what you did," he stated. "It was not an accusation. It was a fact. Sit down." Vanessa flinched as if he had struck her. The command was so total, so unexpected, that her body obeyed before her mind could. Her bravado, her rage, her entire social armor just shattered. She stumbled backward, collapsing heavily into her chair. The blotchy, furious red drained from her face, leaving a pale, sickly, mottled white. She looked at my father for help, a desperate, panicked glance. But Greg, my father, was paralyzed. He was staring at his own father as if he were a stranger. Henry shifted his gaze to his son. "You," he said, his voice thick with a contempt so deep it made my stomach churn. "You stood there. You let her. You brought the pen." He tapped the table in front of him. Next to his own empty plate, there was a thick, legal-sized manila envelope sitting there, one I hadn't noticed before. It was not the white business envelope my father had brought. This one was heavy, official. "I expected this," Henry said, his voice rising, gaining the timbre of a boardroom execution. "I prayed I was wrong. I prayed my own son wasn't a spineless fool and a coward, but I never plan on prayers." He scanned the crowd, his eyes finding the shadows near the grill. "I expected this," he repeated, louder, "for everyone. And that is why my attorney is right here." A figure detached itself from the darkness. "Mr. Collins?" He set his paper plate, the one with the single, sad-looking hot dog, down on a side table. He deliberately, calmly, straightened his garish yellow and blue Hawaiian shirt. He walked from the grass onto the flagstone patio, his leather dress shoes making a quiet, authoritative click-clack on the stone. He stopped directly behind my grandfather's chair, holding a slim black leather briefcase. "Good evening, everyone," Mr. Collins said. His voice was pleasant, professional, and it cut through the terrified silence like a scalpel. If Vanessa looked pale before, she now looked bloodless. "Greg?" she whispered, her hand fluttering to her throat. "Greg, who is that? What is going on?" My father was speechless. He just shook his head, his mouth hanging open. "This is Mr. Collins," Henry announced to the stunned table. "He's been my attorney for 30 years. He's here tonight as a guest, to enjoy the barbecue, and as an officer of the court." Collins, on cue, set his briefcase on the table and clicked it open. "Dad," Greg sputtered, finally finding his voice. It was a weak, reedy sound. "Dad, what is this? It's a party. It's the 4th of July. You're confused. You're upsetting our guests." Henry barked out a laugh. It was a dry, dead, terrible sound. "Confused? Oh, no, son. I'm the only one here who isn't. I've been sitting here for 3 hours, listening. I've been sitting here for 5 years, watching. I watched you let this woman poison my house. I watched you stand by while she turned my granddaughter, my blood, into your indentured servant. And tonight, I watched you try to steal from her." "Steal!" Vanessa shrieked. Finding her voice, it was high and hysterical. "We didn't steal. It's a gift. It's for the family. She attacked me." "Silence," Henry roared. Vanessa physically recoiled, her mouth snapping shut as if he had slapped her. Henry nodded to Collins. "Mr. Collins, if you would." Collins pulled a thick, bound document from his briefcase. "As of 2:30 p.m. yesterday, July 3rd, he began, his voice devoid of all emotion. Mr. Henry Gates signed a final, binding amendment to his primary will and a full revocation of his existing family trust structure." My father's face went from gray to the color of ash. An amendment? Dad, you can't. I'm your executor. We have to agree." "Not anymore, Greg," Mr. Collins said mildly. "As of yesterday, your status as executor was revoked. Your father's entire personal estate, which includes the Gates Willow Creek business, his full stock portfolio, and yes, this property you are currently standing on, has been restructured." He paused, looking up and over his glasses at my father, then at Vanessa. "You, Greg Gates, and your wife, Vanessa Gates, have been explicitly and permanently disinherited." A collective, audible gasp rose from the table. My Aunt Clara's wineglass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the patio. "Disinherited?" Greg shouted, lurching forward, his face a mask of disbelief. That's not legal. You can't. I'm your son. I'm your only son." "I can, and I did," Henry said, his voice pure ice. "The entirety of the Gates estate," Mr. Collins continued, as if Greg hadn't spoken, "has been transferred into a new, single beneficiary, Ironclad trust. He looked, for the first time, at me. The Valentina Gates Protection Trust. Your granddaughter, Valentina, is now the sole executor and sole beneficiary of that trust. In short, Greg, she owns everything. The world tilted. I stared at him, my hand still pressed to my stinging face. This was not the plan. The plan was the clause. The plan was protection. This was regime change. Tyler made a low, choking sound. The truck? He whispered, his eyes wide with a dawning, idiotic horror. The $60,000 truck? Henry finally looked at him. It was a look of profound, withering pity. The truck is gone, boy, he said. The house is gone. It's all gone. Tyler collapsed back into his chair as if his spine had been removed. His face was chalk white, all the swagger, all the entitlement, all the boisterous, conquering energy had just evaporated. He looked like a child who had just watched his puppy get run over. "You can't prove it!" Vanessa screamed. She was on her feet now, her polite mask completely gone, replaced by a twisted, snarling mask of pure hatred. She was pointing a trembling finger at me. "She's lying. She's been poisoning you against us. She's a manipulative, ungrateful snake. She—" "Mrs. Gates," Mr. Collins interrupted, his voice suddenly sharp as a razor. "I would strongly advise you, as a representative of the new owner of this property, to stop talking. But since you brought up the subject of proof—" Henry slowly raised his arm again. This time, he didn't point at Vanessa. He pointed up. "Look up. Vanessa, look at the house." She followed his finger. Every relative at the table turned and looked up at the eaves of the roof, just above the sliding glass doors that led to the dining room. There, mounted discreetly against the white stucco, was a small, black, dome-shaped security camera. A single, tiny red light was blinking steadily. "I had it installed last week," Henry said, his voice almost conversational. "It's top of the line, high-definition video, records audio, too. I told Greg it was for insurance purposes, to watch the pool. But really, I just wanted to document this beautiful family party." He looked at Collins. "I believe the recording of the last 5 minutes, specifically the assault and battery, is quite clear. Wouldn't you say, Mr. Collins?" The word assault hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen with it. This was no longer a family squabble. This was a crime with 35 witnesses and a high-definition recording. "But the clause," I whispered, the words thick, my face numb. "The trust, the duress clause." Collins turned to me, and for the first time, his eyes were kind. "Your grandfather decided the clause wasn't enough. Valentina, he decided to stop playing defense. The disinheritance was already signed, sealed, and delivered yesterday afternoon. He wasn't waiting for them to trigger it." He then turned back to Greg and Vanessa, a thin, cruel smile playing on his lips. "The clause you did know about, however, the one in Valentina's original trust. That was the test. Your grandfather wanted me here, in this ridiculous shirt, to see with my own eyes if you would be greedy and stupid enough to trigger it, and you did, magnificently." He pulled a different paper from his briefcase. "The clause states, and I quote, 'Any attempt by Greg Gates, Vanessa Gates, or Tyler to coerce, threaten, or physically harm the beneficiary.'" He looked directly at Vanessa. "That would be the slap, Mrs. Gates." He continued, "Or to physically restrain her." He looked at Tyler, who flinched. "That would be you, young man, grabbing her wrist." He put the paper down. "Your grandfather set a test, and you failed." Henry Gates let out a long, slow sigh. He looked at his son. The anger was gone, replaced by a vast, cold emptiness. "You had everything, Greg," he said, his voice a low, pained rasp. "You had a family I gave you. You had a business I built for you. You had this house, and you were willing to trade it all. You were willing to trade her for a shiny new truck for this woman's son. "Dad, please," Greg begged, his voice breaking. He was weeping now, fat, ugly tears rolling down his flushed face. "Dad, I didn't know. I didn't. Please." "You tried to live off her," Henry said, his voice flat, devoid of all emotion. "Now, you get to live without me." That was what broke Vanessa. She let out a wail. It was not a cry of sadness. It was a primal scream of pure, animal loss. The house, the status, the money, the jewelry, the white linen dresses, the respect of the neighbors, all of it, her entire identity, turned to ash in less than 30 seconds. She sank to her knees, her beautiful dress puddling on the stone, her hands knotted in her hair. "No, no, 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 no," she sobbed, rocking back and forth. Henry just looked at her, then back at his son, who stood frozen, his face slack with the dawning, catastrophic horror of his mistake. He finally saw the truth. His father wasn't a frail, confused old man he had to manage and placate. He was the puppet master. He was the one who built the stage, wrote the script, and just let them, in their boundless greed, play their parts, and he had just brought the curtain down. "A single slap," Henry Gates said, his voice barely a whisper, but heard by everyone in the silent, ruined yard. "You just cost yourself your entire future." The financial bomb had detonated. The air, thick with shock, still hummed with the force of Henry's words. Vanessa was a crumpled heap on the flagstone, her sobs the thin, dry sound of an animal in a trap. My father stood like a statue, his face the color of wet cement, his eyes vacant. Tyler looked like he was going to be sick, his gaze fixed on the black, dome-shaped camera. The adrenaline that had held me upright, that had fueled my no, suddenly evaporated. The ground seemed to tilt, the fire on my cheek, which had been a distant, academic pain, roared to life, and the throbbing in my wrist was a sick, pulsing beat that matched the thump, thump, thump in my head. I swayed, my good hand gripping the back of a chair to keep from falling. The spell of silence was broken by a scream. Not Vanessa's, it was Zoe. "Oh my God! Valentina, you're bleeding!" she yelled, rushing forward, her phone still in her hand, still recording. "Someone call 911. She needs an ambulance." The command was a spark. The frozen relatives, released from their horror, exploded into chaotic motion. They finally had something to do. "Call 911. Get her some ice. Greg, for God's sake, do something." My Aunt Clara, the one who had watched me serve appetizers for a decade, rushed to my side, her perfumed hands fluttering uselessly around my face. "You poor, poor child. That monster. I can't believe she, in front of everyone." Uncle Mark, the one who had cheered for my gift, was now red-faced with a different emotion. He pointed a thick finger at Vanessa, who was just trying to push herself up. "You don't do that, Vanessa. You just don't do that. That's criminal." Vanessa. Her face streaked with mascara, her voice a desperate, cracking plea, staggered toward him. "It's a family fight. It was a misunderstanding. She provokes. She always provokes. Greg, tell them." But Greg was silent. He just stared at his father. "Mr. Collins?" Henry's voice cut through the rising hysteria, calm and cold. "Secure that video footage. I want 3 copies on 3 separate hard drives, one for you, one for me, and one for the Willow Creek Police Department, immediately." "Already on it. Henry," Collins said, snapping his briefcase shut. He looked at me, a quick professional assessment. "Zoe, keep that phone recording until the authorities arrive." And we didn't have to wait long. The distant, high-low wail of a siren cut through the night. It grew closer and closer until it was screaming at the end of our driveway. The party, the humiliation, the financial ruin. It was all about to become a public record. Red and blue lights began to strobe across the patio. dancing over the pool, painting the faces of the stunned relatives in flashes of emergency. 2 paramedics, a man and a woman, pushed a gurney through the side gate, their heavy bags slapping against their legs. The man, his face calm and tired, knelt beside me. "Ma'am, I'm Ben. What happened here?" I just held my burning cheek. I couldn't seem to form words. "She was assaulted," Zoe said, her voice sharp, stepping into the light. "Her stepmother, Vanessa Gates, slapped her. Her stepbrother, Tyler, grabbed her and assaulted her." "It was a family fight," Vanessa shrieked from across the patio, where my father was now trying to hold her back. "She's fine. She's just being dramatic. Tell them to leave." The EMT, Ben, ignored her completely. His eyes were on me. He looked at my cheek, which was already swelling spectacularly. He gently, professionally, took my left wrist, his fingers probing the deep, crescent-shaped bruises Tyler's nails had left. "It wasn't a stranger, right?" he asked. His voice was quiet, meant only for me. It was the same question I remembered from the fog, the first time this scene had played out. I took a shaky breath, the metallic taste of blood thick in my mouth. I looked past him, at Vanessa, who was now weeping, her face a mask of ruined makeup. I looked at my father, who wouldn't meet my eyes. And then I looked at my grandfather. Henry was watching me, his gaze steady, unwavering. He had done his part. Now it was my turn. I looked back at the EMT. I used the word they had given me, the legal, binding, truthful word. "It was assault," I said, my voice hoarse, but clear. "She hit me. Her name is Vanessa Gates. He grabbed me. His name is Tyler. They did it because I refused to sign a contract to give them money." The EMT's face hardened. "Thank you," he said. "That's all I need. Let's get you to the hospital." The world became a blur of motion, the click of straps as they secured me to the gurney, the sympathetic, horrified faces of my aunts and uncles parting to let me pass, Vanessa's wail of, "You're destroying this family, Valentina," a last, pathetic attempt to make this my fault. I saw Henry, standing tall by his chair, nod once, a nod of approval, a nod of goodbye. Then the heavy ambulance doors swung shut, sealing me inside. The red and blue lights pulsed on the vinyl ceiling, just as I remembered. The siren wailed, and we pulled away from the house, leaving the smoking ruin of the barbecue, of my family, of my entire former life, behind us. The emergency room at Silver Ridge was the opposite of Willow Creek. It was loud, chaotic, and smelled of sanitizer and burnt coffee. There was no politeness. There was just raw, fluorescent-lit efficiency. I was triaged and taken to a small bay separated by a thin, pale blue curtain. A nurse took my blood pressure, her touch gentle. "The doctor will be in a minute, honey," she said. "Police are on their way, too. Standard procedure." A few minutes later, a tired-looking woman in blue scrubs, with Dr. Aris on her badge, pulled the curtain back. She gave me a small, professional smile. "Hi, Valentina. I'm Dr. Aris. Let's take a look at what they did to you." Her examination was quick, but thorough. She shined a small light in my eyes, testing my pupils. She had me open my mouth, gently probing the cut on the inside of my cheek. "That's a nasty laceration," she murmured. "We'll give you a medicated rinse for it." She examined my swelling cheekbone. "That's a significant contusion. We'll get you ice. No fractures, which is good." Finally, she looked at my wrist. "And deep abrasions here. We'll clean this out and bandage it. They'll bruise, but the skin should heal." She finished, pulling off her gloves and dropping them in a biohazard bin. Her professional manner softened. "Valentina," she said, her voice quiet. "You're going to be physically fine, but the EMT's report states you were assaulted by your stepmother and stepbrother. And your injuries are 100% consistent with that report. You know, by law. I am a mandatory reporter. I have to file a report with the police. Even if you don't, I just want to make sure you're aware of that. Is that okay with you?" I nodded, my throat tight. "Yes, That's okay. Good, she said. They're waiting outside. Just be honest. Tell them exactly what happened. You don't have to go back there. She left, and a moment later, the curtain swished open again. A uniformed police officer, a woman with a calm face and Sergeant Miller on her nameplate, stepped in. Miss Gates, I'm Sergeant Miller. I'm here to take your statement about the domestic assault that occurred tonight, if you're feeling up to it. I am, I said. For the next 20 minutes, I talked. I told her everything. Not the decades of emotional abuse, just the facts of the past few weeks. The demand for the $65,000 SUV, the family meeting, the PowerPoint presentation, the plan to force me to sign at the party, the white envelope, the slap from Vanessa when I said no, the grab from Tyler when I reeled. She wrote it all down in a small notebook, her expression neutral. When I finished, she looked up. Okay, that is a clear and consistent narrative of assault, battery, and attempted coercion, based on what you've told me, and the doctor's report. You easily meet the criteria for an emergency protective order. This would be issued by an on-call judge tonight. It would legally bar Vanessa Gates and Tyler from coming within 100 yards of you. They would not be able to contact you, call you, text you, email you, or send you messages through a third party. It would also, temporarily, remove them from the residence. Do you want me to file for that on your behalf? Tears, hot and sudden, filled my eyes. Tears of relief. Yes, please, yes. She handed me a simple, one-page form. I filled out the particulars. I just need you to read it and sign at the bottom, confirming your statement is true. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely hold the pen. I looked at my name, Valentina Gates. I signed it. It felt like the first document I had ever signed that was for me. Thank you, Sergeant Miller said, taking the clipboard. I'm going to call this in to the judge. I'll be back. She left, and the curtain closed again. I was alone, in the silence, my cheek throbbing. A minute later, a soft knock, and the curtain swished open. Mr. Collins. He had taken off the Hawaiian shirt. He was now just in his dress shirt and slacks, looking rumpled, but very much the attorney. Valentina, he said, his voice low. I just spoke with the front desk. I wanted to let you know. You are not to worry about any of this. The ambulance ride, this emergency room visit, any follow-up care, it's all being paid for. By the new trust? No, he said. By a separate legal retainer fund your grandfather set up 8 years ago. He called it his rainy day fund. He specified it was for any legal or medical expenses incurred while extracting Valentina from the fire. He has been planning for this, in meticulous detail, for a very, very long time. Whatever legal action you want to take, it's already funded. Before I could even process that, the curtain opened again. Grandpa Henry. He looked ancient, 1,000 years old. The adrenaline of the confrontation was gone, leaving him looking frail and exhausted, but his eyes were still bright. He must have had Collins drive him. Following the ambulance, he walked slowly to my bedside. I started to cry, a choked, broken sound. Grandpa. He didn't say, I told you so. He didn't say anything about the money or the will. He just reached out his thin, papery hand and took my good one. His grip was surprisingly strong. You're safe now, child, he rasped, his voice rough with emotion. I can't go back there, I whispered, the terror of it still fresh. I can't. I won't. I know, he said, patting my hand. And you're not going back. It's not your home anymore. After tonight, it's not even their home anymore. You're safe. The curtain opened a final time. It was Sergeant Miller. Her face was calm, but she looked satisfied. Valentina? She said. I just got off the phone with Judge Matthews. He has reviewed my report and your sworn statement. The emergency protective order has been granted, effective immediately. A unit is on its way to the house to serve the papers to Vanessa and Tyler right now. As we speak, they will be removed from the property tonight. I looked at my grandfather. He squeezed my hand. I looked at Mr. Collins. He nodded. A small, grim smile of approval. I let my head fall back against the stiff hospital pillow. The throb in my cheek was real. The bruises on my wrist were real. And the piece of paper being served to Vanessa, the one that proved the law was on my side, was real, too. For the first time in my entire life, I wasn't the quiet one, or the helper, or the ATM. I was the victim, I was the survivor, and I was the one the law was protecting. Justice, for the first time, had stood up for me. 3 days later, I was not in the sterile quiet of a hospital room. I was not yet in the apartment above the Thai restaurant, though the keys were a heavy, comforting weight in my pocket. I was on the 42nd floor of a glass and steel tower in downtown Willow Creek, in a conference room so vast and silent it felt like a vacuum. The air smelled of old leather, floor wax, and the kind of expensive, air-conditioned power that has no temperature. I sat at one end of a mahogany table so long and polished it looked like a dark, frozen lake. Beside me sat my grandfather, Henry Gates. He was not the man who had stood on the patio. The righteous, terrible anger that had fueled him that night was gone. It had cost him. He looked, truly, his 80-some years. He was wrapped in the same plaid blanket, his hands, spotted and thin, resting on the armrests of his wheelchair. He had spent his last great reserve of strength to detonate the bomb, and now he was just a man. But his eyes, when they met mine, were still the sharpest things in the room. Across the polished chasm sat the remnants of my family. They were not the beautiful, confident hosts of the 4th of July. They were diminished. My father, Greg, sat stiffly in his suit, his face puffy, his eyes bloodshot and darting. Vanessa was next to him, a ghost of her former self. She was pale, wearing no makeup, her expensive blonde hair scraped back in a severe, joyless ponytail. She was visibly trembling, her hands twisting a crumpled tissue in her lap. And Tyler, he was hollowed out. He sat sunken between them, his eyes wide and vacant, staring at the perfect wood grain of the table as if it were an abyss he was about to fall into. They were here because they had been summoned. They had been served papers by a man in a suit, ordering their presence for a final reading. Mr. Collins stood at the head of the table, a stark, commanding figure in his pinstripe suit, the ridiculous Hawaiian shirt long gone. He was all business. "Thank you all for coming," he said, his voice clipped and formal, echoing slightly in the large room. "We are here for an emergency reading and clarification of the estate of Henry Gates, and to confirm the legal status of all parties present." "This is a mistake," my father burst out, his voice a hoarse croak. It's a misunderstanding. Collins, a family argument. It was the heat. People were drinking." "I was stressed," Vanessa chimed in, the words tumbling out in a pathetic, rehearsed rush. "I was under so much stress, with Greg's business and the party. I wasn't myself. I love Valentina. She's my daughter. I would never. Please. It's not what it looked like." Mr. Collins just stared at her, his expression utterly flat. "Stress," he repeated, as if testing the word. "I see. And it was not what it looked like. Before we review the binding legal documents, Mr. Gates wanted to review the misunderstanding one more time, for the sake of absolute clarity." He turned and nodded to an assistant, who dimmed the lights, a massive television screen, previously hidden behind a wood panel, lit up the wall. "This," Collins said, his voice cold, "is Exhibit A, footage from the security camera installed at 124 Willow Creek Drive, time-stamped July 4th, approximately 7:30 p.m. He pressed a button on a remote. And there we were. There was the beautiful patio, the tiki torches, the laughing relatives. We watched my father stand, watched him tap the glass. We heard his booming, drunken speech about family and unity. We watched Vanessa yank me from my chair, her arm clamped around me, her face a mask of joyful pride. We heard my voice, clear and cold. I didn't agree to that. We watched Vanessa's face twitch. heard her brittle, high-pitched laugh as she tried to steamroll me. We watched my father, his face darkening, as he slapped the white envelope onto my plate. "Sign it, now." We heard my no, and then we watched the slap. In the sterile silence of the conference room, the sound was obscene. It was a sharp, ugly crack, captured in perfect digital audio. We watched my head snap to the side. We watched my hand fly to my face. We watched Vanessa. Her face a grotesque mask of pure reptilian rage. Vanessa let out a choked, gagging sob. "Turn it off. Please, turn it off. I can't." But Collins didn't. He let it play. We watched Tyler lunge, his face purple. We heard him scream, "You bitch! Don't you embarrass us!" We watched him grab my wrist, his nails digging in, yanking me half out of my chair. We watched the plate shatter. Collins let the footage play for another 10 seconds, capturing the horrified, frozen silence of the relatives. Then, he pressed the button. The screen went black. The lights came back on, fluorescent and unforgiving. "The evidence is, as they say, unequivocal," Collins said mildly. "There is no misunderstanding. There is only assault, battery, and coercion, recorded in high definition, which brings us to the legal status of the parties." He picked up his first paper. "First, the emergency protective order you were served, Mrs. Gates, and you, Tyler. It was reviewed by a judge in family court this morning. In light of this video evidence, which was submitted by my office, the judge has upheld the order. It is now a full 90-day protective order. You will remain 100 yards away from Valentina Gates at all times. You will not contact her by phone, text, email, or third party, and you will not return to the Willow Creek residence, which is now her sole property. Do you understand?" "Home," Vanessa whispered, her voice cracking. "But it's our home." "It was your home," Collins corrected, his voice like ice. "Which brings us to the second item, the new will and testament of Henry Gates. As I informed you on the night of July 4th, on July 3rd, Mr. Gates legally and irrevocably signed over his entire estate, including all properties, stocks, and liquid assets, into the Valentina Gates Protection Trust. This document," he tapped a thick binder, "is the final, executed will. It is ironclad. It is not open to debate. Your father, Greg, and you, Vanessa, are permanently disinherited." My father made a low, choking sound. Collins's gaze then shifted, landing squarely on Tyler. Tyler, who looked like he had aged 10 years, flinched as if he'd been struck. "Item 3, Collins continued, the Tyler Gates Educational Fund, which your grandfather had previously funded, was also dissolved on July 3rd. All scholarships, stipends, and tuition payments sponsored by the Gates family, or the Gates Willow Creek business, are hereby terminated, effective immediately." Tyler finally looked up, his vacant eyes wide with a new, dawning horror. My college?" he squeaked. My senior year? You're kicking me out of college?" "You did that to yourself, boy," Henry rasped from beside me. It was the first time he had spoken. His voice was thin, watery, but it cut through the room like a razor. "You chose a $65,000 truck over an education. You made your bed. This is all to say," Mr. Collins summarized, steepling his fingers, "that Valentina Gates now has sole and total control over all future financial decisions for the estate, the business, and all properties. She is, for all legal and financial purposes, the head of this family." That word, family, it broke Vanessa. The terror and shock finally gave way to the one emotion she truly understood: rage. She lunged forward, her hands slamming flat on the mahogany table, rattling the crystal water glasses. "Family?" she shrieked, her voice a raw, ugly sound, the Willow Creek polish gone forever. "You can't do this. We are family. You don't throw your family out onto the street. Greg, tell her. She can't do this." I looked at her blotchy face, her wild eyes, the desperation of a cornered animal. The fear I had lived with for 15 years was just gone. It had been burned out of me on the patio. I felt nothing, no anger, no pity, just a vast, cold emptiness. Family doesn't hit me. Vanessa, I said. My voice was quiet, but it was the loudest thing in the room. It was the sound of a closing door, a vault being sealed. Her mouth snapped shut. My father finally broke. He turned, not to Henry, not to Collins, but to me. His face, the face of the man who had brought the pen, was a ruin of tears and desperation. "Valentina," he begged, his voice breaking, sobbing openly now. "Val, honey, please, the house, not the house. It's all I have. It was your mother's house, your real mother. She decorated your room. You can't take that. Please, I'm your father. I'm begging you. Anything else, the money, the business, but not the house, please." It was the lowest, dirtiest, most pathetic shot he had, using the memory of my dead mother against me, the last weapon in his arsenal. I just stared at him, at this weak, broken man who had stood by and watched. Before I could even find the words to answer, Henry's hand, thin and papery, landed on my arm. "No," Henry said. His voice was just a whisper, but it was absolute. "She is not taking it. Greg, you gave it away. You gave it away when you chose them over her. You gave it away. Every time you put your hand in her pocket, you will not guilt her. You will not manipulate her. Not again. You will leave the property, and you will not return." The fight went out of them. It was total. My father collapsed in on himself, sobbing into his hands. Vanessa just stared, her face blank, her eyes seeing the shape of her new life. A life without status, without money, and without the house that had been her entire identity. "Mr. Collins slid a final thin stack of papers across the polished lake of the table to me. He placed a heavy gold-plated pen on top. "Valentina," he said, his voice softer now. "These are the final acceptance forms for the trust. Your signature here, confirming you are taking control as executor and sole beneficiary. If you'll sign here, here, and here." I picked up the pen. My hand was perfectly steady. I looked at the line. Valentina Gates, the name on the hospital bracelet, the name on the bank accounts, the name on the deed. My name? I signed it. The ink was black and final. I pushed the papers back to Collins. It was done. I looked at my grandfather. He reached over and patted my hand, the one that had just signed. His eyes were tired, but they were shining with a fierce, profound, and terrible pride. "They tried to own you, child," he rasped, his voice so low only I could hear it. "Now, you own the future." I looked across the table at the three people who had tried to break me. They were just people, weak, greedy, and now powerless. They had mistaken my silence for weakness. They had mistaken my service for servitude. They thought I was their bank, their ATM, their ghost in the machine. If your family treats you like a bank, listen to me. You're allowed to shut it down. You are allowed to lock the vault. You are allowed to walk away. Tell me your city. Tell me your town. I want to know how many of us there are out there. I want to know how many of us, finally, stood up. Thank you all so much for listening to my story. I really want to hear from you. So please comment below and let me know what city or country you are listening from, and share your thoughts with me. Please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.